you forever by now, even though it's only been a couple
I
months.
know what we met. It's been like a couple of months. But there's just like everything we both like, the alignment is like so
Yeah.
special.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, with that in mind, let me welcome you to the summit, Jess Jacobs. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is such an honor. I'm so happy to be here amongst like all of these just mind-blowingly incredible women.
It's so fun. Okay, well, I'm going to read your bio so folks know a little bit about you. Okay, everyone, this is Jess Jacobs. She's a feminist artist, activist, philanthropist, and co-founder of Invisible Pictures. A creative storyteller, Jess is galvanizing the movement for equality through the fight for women's reproductive rights. Yes, you are. So great, so important. Okay, I'm going to dive in to your background because it's a really interesting background. It's a unique journey. So tell us a little bit about your start as a storyteller.
Absolutely. So, it was like I started working professionally as an actor when I was a teenager and it'd come up in like the community theater and watch my cousins in Fiddler on the Roof and was like, that looks so fun. That's what I want to do. And had the opportunity in San Diego to start to work in the theater there. San Diego is where I grew up. It has this amazing theater scene and this like lovely artistic community. And so I started there. I moved to New York for school. I was in the theater program at NYU. I ended up sort of taking off, leaving, and it didn't feel the right space for me. And so started to work in the city, moved to LA, shot some stuff out there, moved back to New York, and sort of like got to the place in my career where I was like, okay, I'm in the right rooms, I'm in the right conversations. Like this is where you want to be as an actress. And I wasn't happy. It was sort of like that moment where I remember I was living in Williamsburg at the time. And I remember waking up one morning at this big like window in front of my bed and I felt trapped in some way.
Wow.
Sort of this moment where I was like, okay, like what's happening? This is the thing I've always wanted. And why is this going on? And what I kind of realized was that I was up for these roles where they were telling me that this, this character who was the lead of this new big, NBC TV show. And I was reading this character being like, I've never met a woman who is like this. And then I would go out for, the big CBS show and it'd be like, I don't think that there are any actual people in the world who behave in this way, and what it really kind of ended up feeling like was like I was auditioning for Alice in Alice in Wonderland over and over again, where I was like, she's the lead character, she's like the title character, but she's the least developed and least interesting person in this story. And I kind of looked through, like when they send you the auditions, it has like the whole team, these amazing creators, but so many men that were behind these stories and that were behind the camera. I have nothing against men. I love men. Like they're so wonderful. And men don't know what it's like to be a woman. They don't know what it's like to be in our shoes, to live our day-to-day lives. And so the characters that they were creating, trying to create opportunities for actresses to really like take center stage, it wasn't resonating. And so I went to my manager at the time and I was like, I want to know what it is to produce my own content. I want to know what it is to like tell my own story. And I ended up being connected to my producing partner, Audrey Rosenberg, through my manager. And we were sort of off to the races. There was just so much alignment in terms of what we really believed storytelling could do and what we believed Hollywood could do specifically, because it is storytelling very much, but it also is like, what is the entertainment media landscape's responsibility in the fight for social change? And that was a question that with Invisible Pictures, we really sought to answer. And so that has been our work for the last couple of years. It's been amazing to grow a business. I mean, that's not something that at 24 years old, I thought I was gonna do. And it's been absolutely incredible. It's been amazing to be able to collaborate with the artists that we've worked with, Annie Silverstein, Cootie and Chike. They're just like these fabulous artists. And I woke up in, on I guess March 15th, like almost a year ago exactly, and was like, I love helping to tell other people's stories and I miss telling my own. And so it's such a wonderful thing too, just in the last year to really return to my own art and my own craft and my own storytelling. And so now have a couple of pieces that are in pre-production, stuff that I've written. I'm making my screenwriting debut this year, which is so exciting.
Wow.
Also working on a podcast, bringing stories of abortion to the mainstream. So there's a couple of like really fun, cool things in the works, but it's been a ride. It's been a really interesting journey.
I mean, you're just so alive and your enthusiasm comes through. And I don't think that you probably feel that trapped feeling anymore. It seems like that's dissipated.
Oh my God. It's like, I feel like, over the last, I guess it's been kind of 5 years, like I've really grown these wings. Like I've really been able to say like, okay, how do I like construct, it's like the Icarus story of like flying too high, but it's also the story of like building your own flight mechanism. Like, how do you make it so that you can take off in the world? And of course, it's always in community. It's always like in collaboration and partnership with other amazing people like you and all of the women that are part of this summit. But really like, how do we build a future for our own selves? How do we tell our own stories?
It's so true. I love that idea of building your own wings.
Yeah.
I think sometimes a lot of us are out there looking for where we fit in.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of what we see as closed doors. And then maybe the answer is, well, yeah, maybe that door is closed, or maybe that door doesn't have your name on. So like start chiseling away, make your own door.
Yes. Yes. Like get through the drywall. There's side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, easier said than done, except that even I think that idea, that concept of maybe the thing you're looking for isn't out there yet, and it
Mm.
needs to be brought and birthed into the world. Um, I think it's so interesting that you like gave up the glamorous actress life. It's kind of the thing that many people put on a pedestal. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, like, do you miss it? Like, how do you reconcile that? Do people look at you and go, like, are you crazy? You could have had the pilot on NBC. Like, how do you talk about that with folks?
Well, I mean, I think that there's two sides to it. I think on one hand, the glamour of Hollywood is a little overstated. I think, the process of like auditioning, of prepping, of like going and pouring your heart out on the floor and sort of there's somebody on the other side of the table who's kind of ready to tell you like, yes, you're right, or no, you're not, after offering something that is sort of as personal as the artist's journey, and specifically actors, where like we are our own instruments. And so I like when you're out there sort of like, getting like wanting the job, that there is somebody that's on the other side who kind of has your future in their hands. And so, I would say like the glamour of it on like the red carpet, or even moments like this, like getting to sort of share my own story and like putting my makeup on for like the first time in COVID, you know what I mean? Like there is something so special about it, but it wasn't to me, it wasn't worth what I was having to sacrifice, which felt like my authenticity and like my integrity, right? Like it was like, I could totally keep fighting this fight and keep like stepping into these rooms and asking for somebody to hand my future to me and my career to me.
Wow.
Or what felt like actually the more glamorous thing, even though it was a little bit like I had to get my hands really dirty and roll up my sleeves and like build something for real, that actually was where like the glamour and the fun and the excitement and the challenge really was, because it was about creating my own life. It was about taking my own artistic journey into my own hands.
I want to ask you about the screenwriting, because
Yeah.
even just yesterday, I had a meeting and someone said to me, I have this great idea for a film. I won't share it because maybe it's not my place to share, but it was a great idea for a film. And she said, but I just don't have anybody to write it for me. And, here I'm listening to you. She was so smart, so articulate. Okay, Jess, how did you start writing a film? Like, what would you say to her?
Yeah. So, I mean, my entry into screenwriting was script reading.
Wow.
I I've been reading scripts since I was a teenager, and really like wrapping my head around the process of like constructing a story. And I think there is a formula, and the formula is really well explored. There are, books and courses, and, people go to school for this, like, all of that. And it's all so incredibly legitimate. I mean, I think about it like Picasso, right? Which is like Picasso became Picasso and was able to sort of play with form, but he had a like traditional sort of
Right.
education. And
Right.
so I think really like reading great scripts, really like understanding what those story structures are, practicing that is a huge part of sort of setting yourself up to be able to then also play with form a little bit and really like find your own creative voice. So
Mm-hmm.
while this, you know, while I'm making my screenwriting debut this year, it isn't the first script I wrote.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
there
that's
are other,
important.
it
That's an
is, it
important
really is.
point.
Well, and it's also, I also wrote short stories, which nobody has ever read. And I don't think I will ever let anybody read them, maybe when I'm like 90. But,
Yeah.
you know, I played with like different ways to, I would say to tell stories, but also like really to put them on paper.
Yeah.
Because I think it's also to move from being an actor where again, like your body's your instrument, like you are embodying a character, you are part of that storytelling process in that way. Screenwriting is, you have to be able to put yourself in every character's shoes.
So
And
cool. So
yeah, and
cool.
so, you know, it's as an actor, it's been this amazing thing because I get to play every character in the script that I write in some way.
Mm.
And 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 yeah, the journey of like, oh, what is it to sort of take what is so well worn and so solid as sort of a foundation and then mess with it a little bit. Has it's such a pleasure. And a
Um,
process.
and a process, right. Are you at liberty to tell us what the screenplay is about?
What I can tell you is that it's a little bit of like a never, rarely, sometimes, always meets sliding doors. So we've got like an abortion narrative, but there's also a motherhood narrative, and we kind of are playing with multiverse theory. It sounds very kind of scientific, but it's
Oh,
a deeply human character study of the choices that we as women make and using reproductive health also as a metaphor for like the choices that we make on a daily basis that maybe we don't understand the profundity of them until way down the line and you're like, wow, that was really the thing that changed the course of my entire life.
oh my gosh. I mean, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but during COVID, I've become slightly obsessed with exactly that theory, the
Yes.
multiverse theory and quantum physics and all the leaps.
Well,
Whoa.
in a world that's as weird as ours is right now, you have to sort of be like, are there other options? Like, did this go differently in any universe?
Totally. It's also been really comforting for me to learn science
Yeah,
because it feels like something is holding this all together. And so it's a comfort. But we could talk about that more.
I know.
Although,
I'm like, we're gonna offline.
yeah, but one more thing. I mean, have you read the book, The Midnight Library?
No.
Okay.
Is
So
it
that's
going on the
about
list?
the multiverse.
Okay. Oh, I'm reading. Okay.
Great. We'll
Great. Great.
discuss.
We're gonna talk about
Okay.
that offline.
Thank you, everyone, for letting us dive into that world for a second. Okay, I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back. Although probably we'll get comments that are like, I also am obsessed with
Right,
this.
exactly. Yes, we're like, great. We're going to start a book club. We're going to
Yeah.
share all of our things. Well, I mean, and I think, you know, the thing about the multiverse theory, like, yes, in this particular moment is almost like a sense of like, is a bit of a security blanket or something to know that like maybe there are other options out there. But I think too, I mean, I'll share my own story. You know, I had an abortion when I was 19 years old, and I would have a 9-year-old right now. And in some universe, I do have a 9-year-old. You know, it's like there's some world in which the Jess, who was this 19-year-old college student who found herself pregnant, decided to go through with it, you know, decided to bring her pregnancy to term and raise a child. And her life is so different from mine. And she's entitled in whatever universe she exists in to have made that choice for herself. And I'm lucky to have even had a choice. There are so many people in this country and around the world who don't, for whom choice is actually not the issue, it's access. And I was lucky enough to have access and to be able to make my choice. But you know, it's something that I think about a lot, not because I regret it. It was absolutely 100% the right choice for me, and I'm so grateful to have been able to make it. And it absolutely changed me in so many ways. And I mean, I think that 19-year-old girl is the driving force for so much of the work that I do in my life. But it was a big part of the healing process. And I think part of also what I really wanted to explore in this piece, as I was like, what is the role for narrative film in the fight for reproductive health, rights, and justice? And I was like, really to explore the humanity behind that was like something that really came to me. And it was through this kind of self-expression and through the journey that I've been on to sort of hold all of the kind of complicated things and all of the possibilities. that were sort of present in that one moment.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the idea of why you're so connected to women's bodily autonomy and what that means. You wrote that to me, and that sent a shiver up my spine, because it's not, a lot of times I think we see the battle for reproductive rights as maybe in a singular space, or we see it as, just like if X, then Y. But there's something a bit deeper that you've brought up, and I'd love to hear you explain that.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Oh, I mean, first of all, it's my favorite topic. So thank you for asking. I could talk about this all day. I mean, I think reproductive health, reproductive rights, and reproductive justice are like, they're three different fights, three different things. Health is like the healthcare piece of it, which I feel like is what we talk about. We talk about that a lot, right? We talk about, you know, being able to access care, what that care is like, what the sort of medical processes are, all of that. Reproductive rights is the policy side of things. So that's the legislation, that's the Supreme Court cases that we've all, talked about. That is really like the legislative, legal kind of opportunities for people to be able to control their own bodies. And then the justice piece is the piece around self-determination. That is really looking at the person who can get pregnant at the center. And this was coined by Black women activists. And the mothers of the reproductive justice movement are predominantly Black women. So thank you to them for their tireless work always in this space. And what they were really fighting for was looking at all of the different oppressions that face people who can get pregnant, and the intersection of those oppressions, both from the standpoint of abortion, but also from maternal health, also from menstruation, also from economic, security, from I think climate justice is a really big part of that. If you are deciding whether or not to have a child, and you are going to raise your child in a place where, you don't know if you're going to have to face, a flood or a hurricane or something like that, like how much is that choice actually your choice versus it's being made for you because of the circumstances that oppression has sort of forced upon people. And so I think that, looking at sort of all of these three different parts of the movement is something that as a storyteller, I really see as an opportunity, because what it is it's this space for us to own our narratives, to tell our stories of our whole entire lives, not just necessarily of this one moment, though obviously like I've committed to doing that and I think it's important. But it also is saying like, what are the bigger stories of ourselves, of our communities, of generations from whom we come. I mean, part of my story is also, the shame that I felt and that I carried with me after I made the decision that I made, and had really only told I lived with 6 girls at the time, and only 2 of the girls knew what I was going through. And that was very much on purpose. And I didn't tell future boyfriends or girlfriends. I didn't tell my family. I just shut it down, because I didn't have the examples in front of me for how to deal with it. And that wasn't long. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, it wasn't even a decade ago that I made that choice, and that was what I was sort of up against as a, financially secure white cis woman. So that's not even to say what the stories and experiences are of people who are facing multiple oppressions. I finally decided to tell my mom when I was 25, and she told me that she had also had an abortion when she was a teenager.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I'm in sisterhood with my own mother, and I didn't even know, because the shame that I was carrying is the same as the shame that she was carrying, and probably originates, way, 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 way back. Right. And so the opportunity for us to connect over this and to heal that kind of generational trauma, that generational shame, I think is like really where storytellers have so much power, and like where we're really uniquely positioned to be like, okay, the world can look different, and how do we tell the story of this different world so that we can actually live in it?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's really resonating with me is that I like how you're framing it within the context of justice and and shame and autonomy, because I think that it's such a polarizing topic.
Right.
Um, and so many people just immediately put a wall up. But
Yeah.
as a human rights lawyer, I'm really intrigued by the justice element of it and how it also intersects with other elements of a woman's autonomy and
Yeah.
her rights. I mean, there is a lot happening right at this moment, like right today, about divorce in the ultra Orthodox Jewish community, and how there's not always access to that, and not even only. I mean, we could look at other sort of places and spaces in women's life cycle moments
Right.
where there's just not access to autonomy, that word that I love that you used, and justice. So of course they're not the same, but access to abortion rights, access to healthcare, access to a justice system that can
Yeah.
facilitate a divorce if that's needed. I like how you talked about like access, like to menstrual products as
Yeah.
a girl, meaning to see this within a constellation of rights that women should be able to possess, and how the lack of those rights or the threat of the lack of those rights can have such a deleterious effect on us as individuals.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ways in which, and I'll speak about women's bodies. Women are not the only people that can get pregnant, obviously, but given that I'm living in a cis woman's body, like that's the experience that I'll speak to. Um, Women's bodies are so politicized.
Yeah.
I think I mean, the taxation on menstrual products, the politicization of, access to contraception, access to safe abortion. And then, I mean, even through like menstruation, I mean, not menstruation, through menopause,
Right.
at the end of a woman's reproductive journey, then you're sort of like, okay, and now you're out to sea and you're no longer useful. And, there's all of these things. And it's interesting because there was a study that was done, like an anthropological study, that showed that actually in sort of cave people times, the way that gender was kind of constructed was that it was people who could get pregnant and everybody else. So children, people who don't have uteruses, elderly people, people that were past
Mhm.
their menstruation, or who were elderly. Like those were the two genders.
Wow.
And so this goes way back, right? That like there has been really this kind of biological, like kind of, I don't want to say obsession, but like awareness, I guess maybe is
Mhm.
a better term. And as we've moved into the modern era and all of history, we land ourselves in this moment where I'm going to always come back to media, but like where news media, advertising media, and entertainment media has not contributed the stories of the lived experiences of people who are this like huge part of the population. So and that means that the culture hasn't caught up with what people actually experience on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
And so what ends up taking its place is politics. Again, this is a power dynamic, right? Like these are the people who have been making decisions about all of our lives as sort of lay people, as citizenry, have been majority male and majority white for most of history. And
Mhm.
so, again, when you don't have the lived experience, you have to listen to the people who do. You have to give the space for those people to tell their stories, and that just hasn't been what's happened. And so as far as sort of autonomy and agency, I mean, as I think it kind of comes full circle to my story, my experience as an actor, and sort of being handed a role, told to memorize the lines, and then told to come in and perform, and then somebody on the other side of the table says yes or no.
Mhm.
I have no agency in that process. All that I can do is show up in the body, with the instrument that I was born with,
Yeah.
and I can perform and I can offer my emotional self, and then I walk out the door, as opposed to what it is to like build my own career, build this company, build these opportunities, learn skill sets so that I can, have this whole fully fleshed out existence as an artist in the world. And I feel very similarly about my experience as a woman. If somebody in, the Senate is telling me what I can and cannot do with my body, that means that I do not have the autonomy or the agency to make decisions about all the other parts of my life. If I cannot control my body, we're talking about, you know, we talk about equal pay. If I can't control my own body, in what world do I feel like I can walk into my boss's office who's, you know, a man maybe, and he's sort of the traditional power holder, and fight for the right to equal pay if I can't control what's happening in my own body. So I think, you know, I think that the sort of actor's metaphor and my experience as an actor feels very aligned and similar to this fight for bodily autonomy and agency.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, I mean, we have to wrap up. I could talk to you for hours. I know. Well, we will. We have to do it again. I guess just as a parting shot, just to, you know what? Because I know you've got some really cool films in production or have just released. Why don't you tell us about your films, where people can watch them, and how to get involved?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So I actually have a movie in theaters right now called Long Weekend. It's in theaters, which is like this crazy thing. Please only go if you've been vaccinated or if you feel safe or able to protect yourself. Please socially distance. But it is out there. It is in theaters across the country. It's a beautiful film, a really authentic story from Steve Basilone is our filmmaker, and you know, there's a ton of press out there. You should read his story, his mental health journey, and also sort of his fight for hope in a really hard time in his life. It's a beautiful rom-com. Finn Wittrock and Zoe Chow star in it. I was so honored to be on the production team. It's an amazing group of folks. So definitely check that out, and then keep an eye out for this upcoming film. And I'm launching a podcast in the next couple of months. So there will be some fun stuff coming out soon.
Okay, amazing. Well, we'll make sure that we post your socials. It's just such a joy to speak to you. I'm so thrilled our paths crossed, and I know there's much more in the future. So thanks.
It's such a joy. Thank you for doing this. It's so inspiring.
Thank you.